Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to paint a corgi butt. I'm not gonna lie, corgis are my dream dog. I can't wait to be able to get one someday. I'm totally one of those people who follows all of those corgi butt threads because I mean there's nothing cuter than that little behind walking along. So today we're gonna learn how to paint something soft and fuzzy. Hope you guys are excited. Let's get started. You guys are getting a glimpse at my messy desk right here. You can see I've already sketched on our little corgi, and I'm really excited because most of this is going to be wet and wet, soft watercolor techniques. The colors I'm going to use today are my Holbein Yellow Ochre, my Daniel Smith Burnt Sienna, my Daniel Smith Burnt Umber, that's this one right here, and I like to use my Daniel Smith Indigo to help mix up black. When you combine burnt umber and indigo, it makes a really nice rich black. And then there's some little cool hints of color, some blues that I see in the soft white fur in the corgi. But all of this we're going to work wet and wet. So you're going to need to start by wetting your paper. I'm using a Fabriano Artistico cold pressed block of paper, by the way. This is 100% cotton. The advantage of having a block of paper is that it's glued down on all the sides except for this one little corner where you can remove the paper. And that keeps the paper from warping and buckling. I use blocks almost exclusively now just because it's so much easier. And I always really like my results with the blocks. So I've got an assortment of brushes here. I'll just tell you what I'm using as I use them. So to wet the paper quickly, I'm going to start with a larger brush. I'm going to use my Princeton Neptune 1-inch flat brush. Just dip it in clean water. And we're going to go ahead and wet all over the paper. We are going to need to do this in a couple of layers because we don't want any details to accidentally bleed out. So we're going to start with the soft, light layers of the body first. So make sure your paper is evenly wet, glossy wet all over. No puddles or anything like that, just glossy. And then I'm going to take my Escoda size 8 synthetic round brush, and we're going to start with that. I'm going to dip it in the water really quick and then dab any excess water off on the side of my jar or on my towel. So with my paints nice and wet and ready to go, I'm going to start with the yellow ochre. All right, so with my yellow ochre, I'm just dropping it in to all the areas where I see some more yellowish color in the dog. This can be light, not too intense in color yet. We'll work in layers, build up the pigment. But the reason I wanted to wet the entire area was so that the paint can diffuse around the edges. So I see some yellows right around the base of the legs and of course across the top of the dog. Now I'm going to take my burnt sienna and my burnt umber, and with a much darker color mixture, I'm going to just drop that into the tail. And you can see it's forming this fur texture for us because it's all wet and it's just blooming and blossoming. I'm just dabbing the paintbrush all over where I see the more intense value. And then taking some more pure burnt umber, going really dark with its inside of the tail. And a little bit where the fur is separating on the top of the back. Removing some of that pigment and then going back in and smoothing out some of those blossoms. I'm rinsing my brush really quick. Grabbing a little more yellow ochre. A little more burnt sienna. You can really just play with your colors here. They don't have to be perfect or an exact match. The important thing is to get the values right, and the colors can be almost right. They don't have to be perfect. Every corgi is different after all. Now I'm taking some indigo that's already on my palette, and I have a little bit of brown still on my brush. When I mix those two colors, I get more of a neutral gray. And I'm using that to paint the little area between the two legs. And then I'm darkening the right leg down here. Going darker on the left side too. And my paper's already started to dry, so I'm just dipping in the water to get that flowing and blending again. The one disadvantage of a block is that you can't spray both sides of the paper to keep it wet longer. You've only got the one side to work with. Now, once again, I'm cleaning my brush really thoroughly, and I'm just going to wet a little bit of the paper around the ears, but not all the way out like we did with the whole body, because I don't want the ears to bloom and blend quite this much. It's more of a controlled bleeding. Okay, and then I'm going to take my burnt sienna and just paint on the top of the head. And the paint's going to go wherever we put that water. If you have too much water in your paint when you're adding it to this really wet paper, you're going to get backwash, so just be careful that you only have just enough paint so that it's flowing but not watery. Keeping that in mind will help you avoid backwash and blooms. The ears are almost black, so we're going really dark with these, but we still want it to look fuzzy, and that's why we wet the paper first. Rinsing really quick, and then I'm grabbing some more burnt sienna, a little bit of yellow ochre, and I'm just going to paint this lighter color gently around those ears. Extending the shape of that one just a little more. And then there's a little patch of fur along here that's white, but in my photo it looks a little bit bluish because it's got a cool shadow across it. So we're just going to take a very light cast of the indigo and paint that in the white section of fur. And a little bit along the side just so we can see the edge. Since this is white on white, we have to have some sort of edge there or it's just completely going to disappear. I'm taking my gray and painting the back foot. Need a little more pigment, so I'm taking my indigo. I'm just going a bit darker. I rinse my brush slightly if I want to go a little lighter in value. This helps me create a dark value and then more of a mid-tone as it's turning towards the light. I'm going to mix in a little brown with that. A little more burnt sienna. The coloring of the dog extends over to the left side here. And now I'm manufacturing some of the fur texture on this side. It's okay to have a few hard edges and just a few key spots. And so what I've done is I'm pressing my brush down like that. Can you see how the bristles spread out? Your brush needs to be wet enough for it to hold that shape and have enough paint on it, but it should stay put if you do have a little bit of paint and water on it. This won't really work with a dry brush. And then dipping in the water to soften that a little bit. If it looks too harsh to you, just do a wash over the top. The idea here is that we're just darkening the shadow side along the dog's edge there. Now I'm re-wetting over here because I want a really soft edge. And it's starting to form a hard edge because the paper dried. So just re-wetting that. And then I'm going to go in with the indigo and burnt sienna combination. Not too dark, but darker than this value. And letting it touch the wet paper that we just re-wet. Going over it with more of a cool color here. Blending, blending. It all needs to be so soft. While it's still wet, you can add more color. Just make sure there's not too much water on your brush, again, otherwise you'll get blooms. And now that this little tail is dry, I'm going to add a couple little fur details. Let's go in with more burnt sienna. Spreading out the bristles. Now there are brushes that are made with separated bristles already. And I've tried these, and for some reason I just can't get the same results as I can with a good old round brush. So this is usually what I end up doing. Okay, this area still needs a little more work, but you can see our dog is really starting to take shape. I'm just going to soften out that edge. And then we're going to need to put a shadow in between the legs and just underneath him so that we can feel the separation of those legs. So we can do that next. Once again, I'm mixing up burnt umber and indigo. And I'm going to go ahead and paint a hard edge right there. This dark shadow juxtaposed against the soft white fur. Fill that in. We want our little corgi to look like he's on the ground. We need there to be a light source. So we just painted that whole shadow shape in, and then I'm going to soften the edge. I've just rinsed my brush so it's still damp, and I'm just brushing along that edge, pulling the shape out, and then pulling some of that color up along the side. And now I'm going to paint in this dark shadow on the foot. While that indigo is still wet, the colors can blend naturally when they touch. Rinse really quick, blot, and scrub, softening these edges. I say that all the time, but this is really the key to getting a soft, fuzzy look. Literally softening every edge. Spreading my bristles out again and just pulling some of that paint. I'm trying to move my brush in the direction that I see the fur growing. Here it comes up towards the tail. And now I'm going to be adding some more fine fur texture all across the surface. Since we've got the values blocked in, now we can go in wet on dry, since our paper's dry already, and do the details over the top. Still softening as we go. And now the value is looking a little more accurate, like a nice strong shadow on that side. And since it's pretty clear that the light source is coming from this side of the dog, we want to make sure there's a shadow on this side too, just so it all makes more sense. So I'm going to take my indigo and fill in a shadow on this side. Washing it out and blending it. This can be kind of any shape you want, since this is just a little study of our little figure. But that way it makes more sense. I'm just grabbing a little more of a rich color here to indicate the coloring in our dog. And then adding some little fur texture in this little foot. Okay, this leg is still unfinished. Let's get to that. Look how fun these ears look. They're so soft, so diffused. And we want to give that impression of almost the camera going out of focus as it's further away from us. So that worked out really well. Just adding another little wash of yellow ochre over the top of this. Rinsing and softening. Just felt like it needed a little more yellow, at least on this side, to balance the yellow on that side. And then the neck, or the midsection of the dog, is just barely visible beyond the butt right here. So I'm scrubbing that in with burnt sienna and then softening the edge. And then I'm going to lift, see if this works, lift some of the paint along the top side of the butt. Just to show a little bit more of a separation between the back and the booty. Yeah, that's a little better. Okay, let's finish this leg. So I'm going to start by re-wetting it and then going in with my gray mixture just to darken the overall value. Looking more rounded and shapely. And then we're going to drop in some burnt umber and indigo in the darkest shadow side. Doing kind of a fast, short little brush stroke, moving in the direction of the fur growth. Softening this edge just a little bit. It still looks like a hard edge because it's the strongest shadow next to one of the lightest lights, but I felt like it was just a little too flat looking. And then taking my burnt umber, going even darker. I think one of the major problems that beginning watercolor artists have is that their paintings can look a little bit too washed out or flat, and I think that's because the values aren't correct, or they're afraid to just go too dark, because of course we've all heard that when you go dark you can't fix it. If you go too dark it's hard to fix, and that is true to some extent, but if you don't take a risk and actually go for it, you're not going to get a powerful painting. So I say it's worth it. So here I'm just kind of scrubbing out these edges once more. Maybe some of those hard lines formed. And there we have it, our finished corgi butt. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you want to see the companion piece, the corgi from the front, that tutorial is available at emilyolsonart.com, so be sure to check that out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.